Welcome once again to Mary's School of Prophecy. I'm your professor, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the apocalypse and the co-prophet of these end times. And I'm glad to be back with another live school session today. I missed 2 days, but I should be here. Now, tomorrow, of course, I won't be here because tomorrow's Sunday, and we've started a new process of not having class on Sundays, but I should be back all next week. And I want to start a new series on Pope Benedict's, I call it an encyclical, and he called it, let me get the name, I'll put the title right on the screen for you, The Church and the Scandal of Sexual Abuse by Pope Benedict the 16th. And if he were the acting pope, it would be called an encyclical. But it shows that he is still performing papal duties. He still lives in the Vatican. He still wears papal garments. He wears white. He wears a white skull cap. He is addressed as Pope Emeritus. And consequently, this is the first time in the entire 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church that there have been two popes at the same time in the Vatican, both accepted. And, of course, that fulfills, I believe, a prophecy. Someone said that Catherine Emmerich predicted that there would be two popes in the end times, a good one and a bad one. And therefore, I think that we should discuss what Pope Benedict says. As you know, I have suggested that the two witnesses, Enoch and Elijah, are here now on earth, but they are clothed in sackcloth. That means that they are incognito. We don't know who they are. And I believe that's what the Bible means by their being clothed in sackcloth. And after they are martyred, according to Bible prophecy, that is when we will learn who they are. And it's interesting that the Jewish teenager Natan says the same thing, except that he didn't understand who he was writing about. He called him the Mashiach, which is another term for the prophet Elijah, if you understand Daniel 9. As you know, Elijah's mission will be to the Jews of the end times, and Enoch's mission is to the Gentiles. And I have suggested that the prophet Enoch is actually Pope Benedict, and the prophet Elijah is actually Benjamin Netanyahu, the two Bens, in other words. Now, I am not saying that definitively. I give that as a possible example. But I think it's very possible that they are who I am suggesting. And therefore, I think that it's very worthwhile to us to look at the writings of Pope Benedict now, ahead of time, because if, as I say, he is the prophet Enoch, and after he is martyred, everybody knows it, then people will be reading all of his works with, avariciously? Is that correct? I think so. In any event, it's 4 minutes after, so I have a minute to just take a look at some of the chats to see who's here, to see if we have a full classroom. We have 32 people on board, which is great. And remember, you will have a job in your refuges. You will have a job of explaining these things to the people in the refuge. So, Wendy, I'll just read what you've got to say here, and then I think we'll start in with a class. YouTube, Black Conservative Patriot, and X22 reports, globalization is dead. Oh, be careful, guys. They are way, way, way too positive. Same way with Praying Medic. He emphasizes it. Globalism has a lot of aces up its sleeve. Boot Resources was right. Trump terminated trade benefits and military aid to Cameroon, who committed human rights violations. Oh, I didn't notice that. Wendy says, Jesus cleansed the Vatican temple. Well, Trump will have a hand in that too, if prophecy is fulfilled. But remember, I showed you that Trump train, Isaiah 45 train, and it was smashed by the garbage truck. So, I mean, I like those guys giving a positive message. Mark Taylor does the same thing. He gives a very positive message, but Bible prophecy does not always say that. Read Daniel 9. Well, anyway, Okay, I think we can start. It's 6 after. I gave an extra minute to people to get into the classroom. So what I thought I would do is read as much as I can. Well, first, before we do anything, we'll say our prayer to Our Lady of all Nations. She is the patroness of this program. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the Father, send now your Spirit over the earth. Let the Holy Spirit live in the hearts of all nations, that they may be preserved from degeneration, disaster, and war. May the Lady of all nations, the Blessed Virgin Mary, be our advocate. Amen. Okay, thanks for saying the prayer with me. And now I think we'll start. And what I will do is I will read through his encyclical. I'm going to call it that. And then I will comment. And after I've read, I'll go for about 15 or 20 minutes. And which will probably mean that I've got to do 2 or 3 programs on this encyclical. So let's read the very beginning of what Pope Benedict said. On February 21 through 24, at the invitation of Pope Francis, the presidents of the World Bishops' Conferences gathered at the Vatican to discuss the current crisis of the faith and of the Church, a crisis experienced throughout the world after shocking revelations of clerical abuse perpetrated against minors. Unfortunately, I don't think the Vatican did a dee-die-do. They said they would, and the Pope came out against clerical sex abuse. But, for example, the bishops in the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, they were all set to come down hard. But Cardinal Supich stood up at the last minute and he brought them a message from Pope Francis. No, don't do anything. Hold it. Don't do anything. The Vatican will take care of this. Well, Vatican has not taken care of it. But anyway, that's what the Pope Benedict was referring to. So let's go to the second part that I've got written on here. No, wait a minute. I didn't complete part 1 here. I labeled these verses so to keep them separate. The extent and gravity of the reported incidents has deeply distressed priests as well as laity, and has caused more than a few to call into question the very faith of the Church. It was necessary to send out a strong message and seek out a new beginning, so to make the Church again truly credible as a light among peoples and as a force of service against the powers of destruction. But, as I said, I don't think the Vatican achieved that goal, but Pope Benedict was correct. That is what the Church should have done. Well, let me see. I'm not doing my engineer part here correctly. Now we'll go to 3. Since I myself had served in a position of responsibility as shepherd of the Church at the time of the public outbreak of the crisis and during the run-up to it, I had to ask myself, even though as emeritus I am no longer directly responsible, what I could contribute to a new beginning. Notice, by the way, these sections are divided up into verses of 3. I call them verses. They're not numbered in the original. And that made me think that this is possibly apocalyptic literature. I haven't determined that yet. But now let's start the next verses, the next 3 verses, I guess you could say. Thus, after the meeting of the bishops of the bishops' conferences was announced, I compiled some notes by which I might contribute 1 or 2 remarks to assist in this difficult hour. Having contacted the Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and the Holy Father, Pope Francis himself, it seemed appropriate to publish this text in the Klerusbat, a monthly periodical for clergy in mostly Bavarian dioceses. My work is divided into 3 parts. Again, notice that phrase, divided into 3 parts. That when you see numbers like that, you immediately think of apocalyptic literature. Notice also that Pope Benedict published this. In other words, he is out there performing papal duties. And that's why I call him the true Pope. And we have 2 popes at the moment. And It's not discussed much in Catholic circles, but it should be, because it really is extraordinary. Okay. Now, part 3. In the first part, I aim to present briefly the wider social context of the question, without which the problem cannot be understood. I try to show that in the 1960s, an egregious event occurred on a scale unprecedented in history. It could be said that in the 20 years from 1960 to 1980, the previously normative standards regarding sexuality collapsed entirely, and a new normalcy arose that has by now been the subject of laborious attempts at disruption. And if you think the Pope is exaggerating there, I want to read to you the Google definition of sexual revolution and also the Wikipedia definition. And you'll see that Pope Benedict is spot on here when he says that there was a sexual revolution in the 60s. And I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that one way or another it did affect the church. And a lot of people say, well, the church should have had all these holy people. They should have stood up to it. Well, that's wishful thinking. Some of the people in the church were not holy, as we found out. In fact, that may have been one of the benefits of the sexual revolution. It's interesting that the sexual revolution occurred at the same time as Vatican II. So let me read what Google says. The Google definition of sexual revolution: the liberalization of established social and moral attitudes towards sex, particularly that occurring in Western countries during the 1960s, just as Pope Benedict said, as the women's movement and developments in contraception instigated changes in attitudes towards sex. Well, excuse me a minute. I definitely need a little dandy. As the women's movement and developments in contraception instigated changes in attitudes towards sex and women's sexuality, and sexual equality became an age of society. And here's what Wikipedia says. That was Google's definition. Here's Wikipedia. The 1960s in the United States, and not just the United States, are often perceived today as a period of profound societal change, one in which a great many politically minded individuals, who on the whole were young and educated, sought to influence the status quo. Attitudes to a variety of issues changed, sometimes radically throughout the decade. The urge to find oneself, the activization of the 1960s, and the quest for autonomy were characterized by changes towards sexual attitudes at the time. These changes to sexual attitudes and behavior during the period are often today referred to, generally, under the general blanket metaphor of sexual revolution. So, I think Pope Benedict is exactly correct so far in his discussion about the sexual revolution of the 60s to the 80s and how it affected the church. And we're going to see that he talks about this. Did I finish part 3 here? Okay, yeah. In verse 8. In the second part, I aim to point out the effects of this situation on the formation of priests and on the lives of priests. And 9, finally, in the third part, I would like to develop some perspectives for a proper response on the part of the church. So we see that this opening part, the preamble, so to speak, is divided into 3 parts of 3 verses each. I don't think that's accidental, and as I say, I have not completely determined that this is apocalyptic literature, but it's very possible. So now let's begin with part 1 of his dissertation. The matter begins with the state-prescribed and supported introduction of children and youth into the nature of sexuality. In Germany, the then Minister of Health, Ms. Kate Strobel, had a film made in which everything that had previously not been allowed to be shown publicly, including sexual intercourse, was now shown for the purpose of education. What at first was only intended for the sexual education of young people, consequently was widely accepted as a feasible option. Now, if I were discussing this in mixed company, I'd probably get red in the face, but fortunately, this is a non-personal type medium. But I think this is important to talk about, and if Pope Benedict can talk about it, I think we should also. Number 11. Similar effects were achieved by the Sex Koffer, published by the Austrian government, a controversial suitcase of sex education materials used in Austrian schools in the late 1980s. Sexual and pornographic movies then became a common occurrence, to the point that they were screened at newsreel theaters, Bahnhofkinos. I still remember seeing, as I was walking through the city of Regensburg one day, crowds of people lining up in front of a large cinema, something we had previously only seen in times of war, when some special allocation was to be hoped for. I also remember arriving at the city on Good Friday in the year 1970 and seeing all the billboards plastered up with a large poster of two completely naked people in a close embrace. And of course, all of us lived through that time, and it was shocking. And I don't need to go into it any more than what the Pope did, because I think most of you are well aware of those 8 times. And the effects of those times are, of course, all around us today. So let's continue with what the Pope says. Among the freedoms of the Revolution of 1968 sought to fight for was this all-out sexual revolution, one which no longer conceded any norms. The mental collapse was also linked to a propensity for violence. That is why sex films were no longer allowed on airplanes, because violence would break out among the small community of passengers. And since the clothing of that time equally provoked aggression, school principals also made attempts at introducing school uniforms with a view to facilitating a climate of learning. I'm not sure how. Maybe that was more true in Europe. I don't remember that in this country. I think there were uniforms in parochial schools long before then. I remember when I was growing up, that was the norm. And as far as fights on airplanes go, I don't know about that, but it's interesting that there are clothing standards on airplanes, which I had never known about, but there are, even today. So let's continue. Let me see if I get the right one here. As you know, I am not only the host of this program, but I'm the engineer also, so I have to show these slides in their correct order. Verse 14. Part of the physiognomy of the Revolution of 1968 was that pedophilia was then also diagnosed as allowed and appropriate. I think in this country we had people like Kinsey, and it turns out that he was a pedophile. But I remember at the time, all of his studies showed that, it's perfectly normal for children to be interested in sex at 2 and 3 and 4 years of age. And of course, he was justifying pedophilia. I think we have time to do a few more verses here. I think we did that one. Okay, verse 15. For the young people in the church, but not only for them, this was in many ways a very difficult time. I've often wondered how young people in this situation could approach the priesthood and accept it, with all its ramifications. The extensive collapse of the next generation of priests in those days, and the very high number of laicizations, were a consequence of all these developments. And I think Pope Benedict is correct. I remember Archbishop, the one was in Cleveland, was it? I can't think of his name. He was turned out that he was a active homosexual. He stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from the church. And the final class of the year for the seminarians was they had to watch a pornographic movie of all kinds of homosexual and heterosexual acts. That was part of their education. I can't think of his name now, which is probably a good thing. At the same time, independently of this development, Catholic moral theology suffered a collapse. that rendered the church defenseless against these changes in society. I will try to outline briefly the trajectory of this development. Until the Second Vatican Council, Catholic moral theology was largely founded on natural law, while sacred scripture was only cited for background or substantiation. In the Council's struggle for a new understanding of revelation, the natural law option was largely abandoned, and a moral theology based entirely on the Bible was demanded. Well, I think Pope Benedict is going off in a different direction now, so I think we can discuss what he has talked about so far, and I will continue this not tomorrow, but Monday. And I think what he wrote is very important, and as I say, I think it's going to be, people will look back upon it. It's very clear, and it's interesting, and this is the type of thing the church should be promoting rather than the garbage that comes from Pope Francis, like Amoris Laetitia, pure garbage. This is the type of encyclical that should be discussed everywhere in parishes, because it's far more meaningful and it's far more important and relevant today. So I think we can now go to the chat, and I will continue this on Monday. And Wendy is still talking. Mr. Tapley, you're right. World War III was stopped in 1 hour by U.S. Air Forces and Trump's intelligence drone striking Iran's Soleimani, who planned to nuke Baghdad, Jerusalem, and D.C., lighting a full-scale world war. Thank you, USA. Well, that's interesting, Wendy. I hadn't heard about that. But I know Trump did the right thing. His right hand is directed by Almighty God. We know that from Isaiah 45. Wendy says, though Trump said to prepare for severe retaliation. No, I'm not really up to date on this. That's very possible, people. Jesus and Mary, inseparable flat earth Catholic. Hope the vice president becomes president. Not that I'm an American. Ho, ho. Also, the Queen's chaplain, vicar, has converted to Catholicism. Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Obviously, he had to find a new job. Yeah, I remember when Tony Blair converted to Catholicism. He couldn't do it while he was prime minister. I mean, we talk about freedom of religion. They don't have freedom of religion in most European countries. It's amazing. Aren't we lucky to have freedom of religion? All the freedoms we have. But I guarantee you, well, Hillary Clinton spoke about taking away freedom of religion. She said the people in religion have got to change. She was talking about abortion. And she laid it down the line. Okay. More good news, though. Yeah, that is good news. Carolyn Couch says, Queen Elizabeth of England? That would be very interesting, because Prince William's grandmother, mother of Diana, had also converted prior to her death. Converts all around for the monarchy to see. Carolyn says, I don't know how anyone could be a follower of the Church of England anyway. What a ridiculous history of how it all began. Yes, it's hard to belong to a church whose founder, the reason he began the church was so that he could have 6 wives, and he could murder whichever ones he wanted to get rid of. Not exactly an exemplary, someone to look up to as the founder of your denomination. But I guess he made the trains run on time, so to speak. Kathleen Christine DiVillario checks in. Just Jackie Healy says, our real, true Pope. God bless and protect Pope Benedict. Sister Renee Mauser says, seems like the entire world, the church politics, everybody is getting in line in their place. Our Lady is getting all her ducks in a row before everything blows. When it says, PF was invited, PF the FP. In case anybody wants to know who PF is, PF the FP was invited to join the Earth Alliance on terms. He exposes the sexual abuses. Oh, if he exposes the sexual abuses in the church. Oh, okay. Well, that sounds like I'm sure he'll qualify to join the Earth Alliance. Your mom says, good afternoon, everyone. Don't forget to thumbs up this video. Sister Renee says, it's becoming more obvious that every single thing I've ever gone through ever done in my entire life experience has led me and prepared me for what's coming soon. Now I feel the exact same way, Sister Renee. Everything, all of my, like you say, all of my past experiences, even though at the time they seemed maybe not important and they didn't seem, I would say to myself, why am I doing this? What's the point of this? Like going in the military, I thought that was a real hindrance to my development, spending 2 years in the military. Looking back on it now, I realize that was crucial. That's how I learned about the chain of command. That's the first thing you learn in basic training is the chain of command. And if you don't know the chain of command, you get kicked out of the chow line. I very soon learned the chain of command. I guarantee. One smart aleck lieutenant knew that I got through every time. Whenever he would ask me, I knew all the answers. So this time he tried to. He was bound and determined to kick me to the back of the chow line. So I went right through, and I went right down all the chain of command. Only he said was, what does, what was the one he asked me now? Oh, shoot. Why should I tell this story if I can't remember what he asked me? This is crazy. Oh, well. It'll come to me. He asked me a question that I guarantee nobody else knew, and I knew it. He was very much impressed, and I got to eat my chow, and he never bothered me again. Oh yeah, GI. He asked me, what does GI mean? Well, that's not part of the chain of command. But I told him it means government issue. So he begrudgingly let me go to the head or continue in line. He was always asking his questions near the front of the line so that you had to go back a long ways. But I never had to go back. Well, anyway, at the time I thought it was all silly, but see, now I know about the chain of command. And of course, the chain of command in the end times is what we find in the book of Esther. So thanks for that comment, Sister Renee, and I couldn't agree with you more. Patricia Arndt checks in. Kathleen says, if you get a text for a white squall, it's a cry for help, and be aware that a local battle with a Q-storm is in the area. Okay. Josephine Vita-Colonna says, God's still in charge. His will be done. Yes, this is the final exam, people. If we are going to make it into the millennium, we have to learn how to live perfect. We have to be perfect, even as our Father in heaven is perfect. It's not going to be easy to do. And some are going to be martyred trying, but we have to do the best we can. And if we don't, if we take the mark of the beast, for example, forget it. And that's what the choice is, as Catholic Crusader wisely says. There are only two denominations in the end times, those who take the mark of the beast and those who refuse. Let's see. Joni's Fingal's Cave says, you are fearless, Mr. Tapley, covering such a delicate topic. Well, yes, I guess. I just hope YouTube doesn't cancel some or censor some of it. But I figured normally I wouldn't talk about it, like you say, Joni, but if Pope Benedict talks about it, I figure it's important, and we should. When he says, indeed, Sister Renee, Mother Mary and Jesus loves you for your firm stance in protecting the Eucharist. Kathleen says, where we go one, we go all. Came from the White Squall movie. Yes, QAnon mentions that quite often. The following message is held for review, and I have no idea why. And here's what he says. Jesus and Mary says, I just read a message above about Pope Benedict. I just posted a video on my YouTube channel. Is Francis Pope? Please watch it, you all. Well, Francis is accepted by the One Worlders. They accept Pope Francis as the Pope. And we're having a split in the church. Pope Benedict is the true Pope. Not many people in the church acknowledge him as such, but I do. That doesn't mean we shouldn't pray for Pope Francis. I mean, I pray for him to convert. He has to, if he's going to save his soul. If he continues on the path to being the false prophet, his fate is described in the book of Revelation because he will be cast alive into hell. He isn't even given the benefit of dying. Sister Renee, thanks. Wendy? Well, my chat just took off. Well, I can't believe how much here I am. M. Jody says, I am happy to be back after Christmas holiday. I have been watching all I missed. Oh, okay, thanks, M. Jody. Kathleen says, thank you, Wendy, for the heads up. To the Revolution says, Iran has been at war with us since the 70s. Personally, I see nothing wrong with fighting back. I agree. Patricia Ryan says, one would think that at Pope Benedict's age, things cannot be too far off. Well, that's exactly right. In other words, if Pope Benedict has a big role to play in these end times, and I think he does, in fact, I think he's the bishop dressed in white, that means he will be martyred. Bruce Pollard says, please pray for my son Brucey, who passed away yesterday afternoon. Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that, Bruce. I know you asked us to pray for him. Patricia Arndt says, many prayers for your son Bruce. Blessings to your family. Sister Renee says, I will add him to my prayer book and my petitions on my altar. Be blessed, dear one. Wendy says, so sorry, Bruce. God bless. Kathleen says, will do, Bruce. Yeah, we're very sorry to hear that, Bruce. Bruce Deal says, greetings to all. Christine says, 70 years is biblical, and the end of the battle is soon. The good side wins. Yeah, 70 years is a generation in the Bible, but 80 years is also a generation. So there's kind of a distance there between, in other words, it's not the length of a generation is not an exact time frame. Bruce Deal says, this meeting Pope Francis is planning for May is the New World Order and religion. Carolyn Couch says, William, when your screen showed 32 watching, mine showed 39. It never matches what yours says. Well, mine says right now 46. So see if that matches what yours says. And there is a 10-second delay, but it still says 46. It still says 46. So, well, it just dropped down to 44. Now that'll show up on your screen maybe in 10 seconds. See if yours drops from 46 to 44. Chronic Sinner says, hello, my friends. Sister Renee says, Carol and I think it's the 10-second delay. That could be. KR says, every other word is cut off, choppy audio. Gee, we ought to be over. Well, it's Friday night, but still, this is not good. People have been complaining about the buffering. I have a new system I'm going to be trying, maybe tomorrow morning, although I don't think I'll have it set up then, but this should be very fast. What I have should be a good setup. Indiana says, praying for Brucey now. May the Holy Spirit heal your broken heart. Wendy says, yes, spot on. My husband agrees also. He said Pope Benedict is right. Yes, he is. Remember when he resigned? All the newspapers were filled with saying, oh, he can't live another 6 months. He's at death's door. He's got fatal diseases, etc., etc. And I told you at the time, I said, that's all phony baloney. There's nothing wrong with Pope Benedict. Pope John Paul II was in far worse shape than Pope Benedict was. And he hung on right till he was on his deathbed. And that's the way it should be for a pope. Pope Benedict was forced out. And we know that God was not pleased, even though God told him to resign. Even though God appointed the false prophet in his place, the Lord let us know that this was not his preferred plan when he struck the Vatican with lightning at exactly 5:55 p.m. It's interesting how the photographer got that photograph. Bruce Deal says, is World War III prophetic? meaning certain to happen. Is this situation with Iran the trigger? I think so. If you want my opinion, I believe it is. Now, I think we can pray for it to be mitigated, and I believe that it starts in the Middle East, and it could be the trigger. The deep state is not going to allow this. It's not going to go without some kind of response. In fact, I'm guessing that it does blow up in the Middle East, and I think that's how. In fact, I've suggested this before. I think that's how Pope Benedict will be martyred. I suspect he'll be sent as a peace envoy. Now, this is just speculation on my part. I'm not prophesying. I think he will be sent as a peace envoy to Jerusalem, and that he'll be martyred there, which is what the Bible says. Bruce Steele asks, how old was Brucey? I'm so sorry. And Bruce Pollard said he was only 50 years old. Wow. That's very sad. And, of course, you lost your wife, 2 years ago, Bruce. So it's hard I would think it's very hard to lose one of your children who's a lot younger than you are. M. Jody says, we'll be praying for Brucey. Sister Renee says, Bruce, Google Gregorian Masses for the deceased. Archbishop Harry Armstrong. 30 Latin Masses in a row for only $100. He is a good friend. Souls benefit greatly. Aldi says, Wendy, where do I find this news? I'm not sure what news she was talking about. I think it was the one I had questions on too. Sister Renee says, I have a pamphlet called Mary's Modest Dressing, or Dressing in the Mary-like Way. Women don't realize that they're not to show bare, sleeveless arms. I agree with that. The modesty norms are still in force in the Vatican, and one of them, as you're saying, is sleeveless arms. You have to throw a shawl over your shoulders or something like that. The following message is held for review. Bruce gives his email here, and they blocked it, and I don't want to give your email, Bruce. Why did you do this? Did you want someone to send you an email? I don't think it's a good idea. We have trolls watching all these programs. You have to be careful. Who did you want to have write to you, Bruce? Sister Renee said, I know when it gets hot, women want to bare their arms, but Mary's way is having a blouse that goes down almost to the elbow. Sleeveless clothes in church are very sad. I agree with that. Wendy says, wonderful, Sister Renee. Sister Renee says, if I have any of these pamphlets left, I will mail one to William, and he can show you it sometime after the rosary. Okay, great. I'm sure there's lots of information on the internet. I think if you Google modest clothing, you would probably learn what the rules are. Carolyn Couch says, I thought Benjamin Netanyahu was secular. Is he a religious Jew? As would be necessary in order for the Elijah role. I've heard that he is. I've heard that he has Bible study in his house once a week. I'm not sure. I mean, I can't verify that, but I read that somewhere. Dwayne Ducote, and the fact that he's opposed violently by Barack Obama ought to tell you he's a good guy. Obama spent, hundreds of thousands of U.S. tax dollars to try to defeat Benjamin Netanyahu in his last election. That alone tells you that he's a good guy. Dwayne Ducote says, I am really not comfortable with Pope Francis, and this is bothering me. Well, I think what we're having is the schism as prophesied. Wendy says, Alti, Google beforeitsnews.com. Alti says, sweet. Oh, Thank you, Wendy. Okay, well, and I'm glad you wrote it that way, Wendy, because then YouTube normally would cut that right out of there. Kathleen says, the mystery of the Guadalupe book talked about the 20 constellations, and one of them was called the Seven Sisters. Yes, that's a well-known constellation. Wendy gives some emojis to Alti. Patricia Iron says, very interesting. The foreword in the book, The Warning, that I'm reading was written by Bishop Gavin Ashenden, chaplain to the Queen of England, 2008 to 2017. He is the one that just joined the Catholic Church. Isn't that interesting? Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Patricia. Sister Ray says, leaving now to go to confession. My chat just took off here. Wait a minute, people. At Holy Mass, God bless us, everyone. We are blessed to have a priest who hears confessions right before Mass. Praise be to God. Yes, it is very convenient, and we have the same situation in my parish. Not enough people take advantage of it. You know, if people took more advantage of it, that would be a blessing. M. Jody says, can't wait to get my first book. Mary will crush the head of the serpent. I sent a money order. Your video is how I am learning so much truth and helping me as I convert to the church soon. Well, isn't that great to know? Thank you, M. Jody. Show that. Well, I have to reach way over to show it. The order form is on my website under newsletter. You can order any of my 4 books, or if you want to order all 4 at the same time, you can. Carolyn Count says, mine says 45, now 46, now 45. Right now it says 47 here. Whoops, it just jumped up to 50. Remember, there's a 10-second delay, so I'll wait a few seconds, and if it's still 50, it's still 50. So, let's see, Rosary Piper says 45. Alti says, good audio here. Good. Carolyn says, no buffering here. Okay. Wendy says 46. Well, good. It could be the person's computer or their own wherever they get their signal from. Kathleen says so. It says only 14 for me. How can that be? Mine just jumped up to 49. Or what was it, 49? Anyway. Adam and Nancy says, no buffering in Zuni, Virginia. Great. Well, Kathleen says, she will crush that I had by Stephen Mahowald. Is that a book? Alti says, is Bruce the guy we were talking about that wanted a priest for confession? I don't remember. But Bruce Pollard told us, was it last week, that Brucey was very ill. Kathleen says, is an awesome book about the New World Order. Oh, here, now you explain what that is. Is an awesome book about the New World Order and how Our Lady crushes the Masons and the New World Order. Okay, well, I agree with that. MM says 47 here and good sound. Wendy says, Alti, also YouTube Gary Larrabee's today's post, President Trump's intelligence. Click link in blue letters. Okay, I don't usually watch him, but I have on occasion. Jacqueline sends prayers. Carolyn Couch says, I will be praying for you too, Bruce. I am so sorry. Rosary Piper says, yes, it is interesting that the photographer snapped the picture at the moment lightning hit the Vatican. God wanted us to know. Well, do you know how that happened, Rosary Piper? It's kind of interesting. Actually, lightning hit it twice. And the first lightning strike alerted the photographer. He wasn't actually taking a picture of the Vatican, but the lightning struck and he immediately took a picture. Or he set up to take a picture. And 2 minutes later, the lightning struck the exact same spot and he got the photograph. It's what's interesting is that, and I'm trying to think who of my subscribers alerted me to this. Daniel 2300, I think his name is. He looked it up, and lightning strikes are recorded in Britain if they're powerful. And on that photograph with the lightning, you can see it's a little bit after 5:55. It's like 5:53 and a half. But the first strike, the one that alerted the cameraman, was at exactly 5:55. When he says, what I'm nervous for is the MOAB that Obama gave to Iran in 2018 or 2017. Well, that was the whole purpose of Obama. I mean, that was his whole idea, was to send weapons. Anywhere he wanted to cause chaos was to send in weapons. And that was his motivation. Jacqueline says, I feel so betrayed by the Pope Francis. Aldi says, Jackie, it's okay. We knew he was the false prophet. Well, it's one more test for us. I mean, I was raised, as I'm sure most of you were, to give all kinds of allegiance and credibility and to the Pope, whoever the Pope was. Wow, we knew that we were in a battle. We were in a society that always made fun of the Pope, and we always stood up for the Pope as Catholics. That was one of the things that we did. So it's very hard for Catholics now to have a bad Pope. Who do we stand up for? What do we do now? And then this is part of the temptation of these end times. This is part of our test, part of our final exam. We have to learn to distinguish between Pope Benedict and Pope Francis. And the world is not going to promote Pope Benedict, but that's what we must do. Let's see. Jackie says, really? Thank God, I feel so bad. And the following message is held for review. Well, Kathleen spells a word wrong here. So YouTube blocks this following message, which I will show you because I think it's because she spelled a word wrong. So I will read it for you if I can get it here. So here's what Kathleen says, and I'm going to read it the way I'm sure she means it. The Aztecs had 20 months, and they had Indian zodiac signs, crocodile, wind, etc., etc. Okay, well, I think I knew that. I'll read the rest of hers down here. Rain and flowers. One constellation had 7 sisters, Scorpio, and some other word I can't say. I don't know if that's quackazodal, I think is what that's supposed to be. Okay. Wendy says, okay, to be clear, we have 2 Renees and 2 Josephines and 2 Bruces. Isn't that interesting? Yes, we do. Renee Smith from overseas and Renee Mauser, Josephine, and 2 Bruces. Well, Bruce is talking about his son, Brucey. Bruce Pollard. Okay, Kathleen says, rain and flower. Oh, so I guess I read that. Jacqueline, do you think we are in the end times? Oh, most certainly. Kathleen says, the Guadalupe image represents 645 on 12/12/1531. Maybe the 45 is for Trump. Well, you mentioned that, and there's no sense in me showing the image because, as I've said many times, Kathleen, you really should post videos to YouTube and explain these things. A new era. Toss. Hello, everyone. Do you know about the rainbow image of Guadalupe on an old bank in Clearwater? They have a ministry called Shepherds of Christ. Yes, if I had that image, I would show it because it really is a very interesting image. An obvious sign of the end times. But thanks for mentioning that. Jacqueline says, hello. Roar Lion says, great here. No, great as far as buffering goes. To the Revolution says, if I have buffering, it sometimes helps if I leave the chat and go back in. praying for my wife's wrist and her mother. Okay. Wendy says, USA troops are guarding the 12 trucks in the green zone in Iraq. In those trucks is the brand new Iraq currency. Central Bank of Iran is. I can't be surprised that YouTube allows that, although I'll say it, is pissed off. That's right. That word is right in the Bible, so I guess I can say it. But I hadn't heard that, Wendy. Where do you get this news from? This is interesting news. You always have some interesting news, and I don't remember reading that. X22 report? He's pretty good. Except I'm usually kind of bored with economic news. Kathleen says, in the European sky, the corona borealis, or northern crown, is the exact center of the sky, and that's where Mary's crown was on the Guadalupe image. Okay. Well, like I say, Kathleen, I mean, that's the type of comment you really have to demonstrate it. Jacqueline says, wow. Wendy and 2 Kathleens. Jacqueline. Alti says, Jacqueline, I would say yes to many abortions and sins that provoke God's wrath. Well, the Whore of Babylon, which is primarily the United States, is destroyed in 1 hour by the scarlet beast because of 3 primary sins: abortion, greed, and the occult. Jacqueline says, I agree with the disgusting behavior going on. Yes, and it began in the 60s with the sexual revolution, no doubt about it. Pope Benedict is right on, and it did affect the church. But was it good for the church? I mean, we got rid of a lot of deadwood, and maybe that was the purpose of it. We did not, the average Catholic had no idea what was going on. Well, I mean, you once in a while you hear a rumor, but Kathleen says, lots of buffering here. That's interesting. Maybe if you go out of the chat and come back in again, like he suggested. M. Jody says, does the lightning hitting the Vatican at 5:55 have something to do with prophecy? 5:55 is Mary's number in Bible prophecy. My very first, check out my very first video, which I posted on here 11 years ago. And I think I called it the evil number 666. I think I called it. The number for the Antichrist is 666. The number which defeats the Antichrist is 555. That's Mary's rosary. Here's how those numbers are derived. 666 is derived from the fraction 2/3. 2/3, as you know, equals 0.666. And the decimal does not count as far as prophecy goes. So what does 2/3 represent? 2/3, in other words. It represents man over God. 2 is a number for mankind, a man and a woman. 3 is a number for God, a divine trinity. So when you put man over God, 2/3, you get 666. Now, just the reverse is how you defeat 666. And that is you put God in his rightful place over man, 3/2. And that yields a fraction also, it yields a decimal, 1.5. And as I say, decimals don't count. So that is the number 15. 15 is the number that defeats 666, and 15 can be expressed as 5 plus 5 plus 5. And that symbolizes Mary's rosary, the 5 joyful mysteries, the 5 sorrowful mysteries, and the 5 glorious mysteries in the original rosary. So that is the significance of lightning hitting the Vatican at exactly 5:55. When he says 2 Kathleens, okay. Alti says, I'm like St. Nicholas. I can't tolerate heresy. I pray for him, but not for his intentions. My chat just took off. Sorry about this. Okay, Alti says he prays for Pope Francis, but not his intentions. Well, I do too. Alti says, to be honest, I don't pray for him anymore during the rosary. Well, I don't blame you. Jacqueline says, I think Satan has entered the church. Well, Pope Paul VI said that 40 years ago. He said, the smoke of Satan has entered into the church. Very famous quotation from Pope Paul VI. To the Revolution says, I really hope Obama didn't give Iran a Moab. Is this true? Well, he probably didn't do that, but I wouldn't put it by him. He did send him $1 billion in cold, hard cash. Carolyn Couch says, in these end times, those of us who belong to Christ are given this gift that we can see the evil in Cardinal Wormwood. Some can't see it. Look at the people who want to shake his hand. I know, he seems just as popular as John Paul II. John Paul II, I can see why he's popular, because he was a wonderful saint. Wendy says, me too, to the Revolution. Padre Pio says, hello, William. I saw hundreds of drones in the sky, traveling in formation in October, in Minnesota, just like Colorado and Nevada. I wonder what is going on. God bless, Pio. Well, that's interesting, Padre Pio. I have seen, in the last 2 or 3 years, I have seen quite a few drones, but I've never seen them in formation like you mentioned. I usually see them one at a time going across the sky. And you can tell they're not planes because the lights don't flash on them, at least what I have seen. They don't blink. They don't make any sound. And they are quite bright, but there's usually just one light. Although I have seen, they don't fly, the ones I have seen fly in a kind of a herky-jerky pattern. It might be the atmosphere, but that's what I have seen. And some people tell me that they're weather balloons, but I don't remember seeing weather balloons from the first 75 years of my life. It's only in the last 5 or 6 years. But as you say, wonder what is going on. I don't know. It is interesting. Jacqueline says, oh my, did you see him slap the woman's hand? And when he turned towards the camera, the evil in his face was shocking. That's what was shocking to me. You kind of saw exactly what he was all about. And it's amazing how his face completely changed. He was very happy. Up until then, he was smiling all smiles. And I think he did shy away from that woman. He did not want to confront her. And somebody said that she was going to tell him about the situation of the Catholic Church in China. And he turned away. And he didn't want to talk to her. And she reached right out and grabbed his hand and pulled him towards her. He was not happy. And the look, as you say, the look on his face was pure anger. Alti says, I agree, Jacqueline. Alti says, Wendy is like Angel Gabriel bringing the good news. Yes, Wendy is a very faithful contributor to this. She's from Hawaii. So that means, what time is it in Hawaii right now? I don't really know. Is it like about 2 o'clock 1 o'clock in the afternoon? No, it's, I'm not going to guess. Mark Trusso says, Lise, check out the VW Bug New Year's Eve commercial. Did you watch that? It's kind of interesting. That is loaded with end times prophecy. Even the music is merry and let it be. I did watch that. Mark, you told me to watch that, and it is kind of interesting. The VW Bug is they're phasing it out, and they made it into like I guess the Bug has been around for 80 years or something, and at the end of the commercial they show the Bug flying off into the sky. Let it be. They'll bring it back again. To the Revolution says, Padre Pio, I do not know, but I suspect this is military training. Military is using drones to swarm targets. I'm wondering if the Tic Tac Shades UFOs are new military craft or demons. I haven't heard about them. I have read about these drones. I think you're probably right about the military using drones. A New Eritas says, what do you think about the Q movement? Well, I'm a big Q supporter myself. And I think, this is probably controversial, but I'll say it. I think President Trump has 3 missions, just like King David. Prince, priest, and prophet. So he's already the prince. And I think QAnon is his prophetic arm. And I think he will actually, after he becomes a Catholic, I think he will become a priest. And I know people don't agree with me on that, but I'm just throwing it out there. M. White says, can someone explain why William is doing live cam on the issue? Well, why not? For the last 2 years, that's all I've been doing now is live cam. I do it because it's good training for me. Because I have a tendency not to be a good speaker. In fact, I still am not a good speaker. I watch a lot of the Protestant ministers on false prophets on YouTube. They have nothing to say, but they're very good speakers. So they're the competition, so to speak. And if they can say nothing and do it very eloquently, I say I've got to learn how to say the truth eloquently. And that's really why I'm doing it. I used to make videos and prepare them and write out my script. And I used to do it that way and then edit the videos. I have a nice camera here that does that. I have a nice Sony, beautiful camera. In fact, this is how I do the premieres. I set my camera up and do a tape of it. Wendy says, Mr. Tapley, I have the currencies of rupiah, Iraq dinar, Zimbabwe notes, Vietnamese dong money to exchange. Trump says America is gold backed. Well, not now. JFK Sr. and Lincoln tried to restore the republic back to America. Well, I've heard a lot about that people try to think that the central bank is the big villain in all this. And they say that Congress should be in charge of the money, but they are in charge of it. They're the ones that set up the central bank. Bruce Deal says it's part of the class. Oh, you mean why I'm doing live cam? MM says, interesting. 2/3 voted for abortion in Irish referendum, supposedly. Yeah, well, GS and all of his subordinates poured millions of dollars into Ireland. Not that they should have paid attention to it, but, well, I don't think Ireland is going to survive any more than Britain. I mean, I always knew Britain would be burned with fire in 1 hour, and I used to think that Ireland could avoid it, but they're not. They can't now. And Jody says, that is very interesting. I will look for your first video. Yeah, I think if you type in the evil number 666, I think if you type that in, well, if you type that in and then write Third Eagle Books, you'll see my very first video. Should come up. Kathleen says, Babylon is fallen. It's because it was hit twice. Speaking of the Vatican, which is really a Protestant sect now, and Masons. Yes, it's exactly, and I've said that for many, many years on here, that the one world religion would be Protestant in nature, but that it would be headquartered in the Vatican. Carolyn says, Republicans, one that are Christians and ones that are super capitalists, or who only care about money. Lots of those in the Republican Party. Now lots of dollars to be made with the legalization of marijuana. And they want to legalize it here in New York State, but the Democrats and Albany are bickering about who's going to get all the money. That's the only thing that's saving us in this state. Otherwise, they'd have legalized it long ago, just like they legalized gambling in this state. In New York State, gambling is against the New York State Constitution. Politicians don't pay any attention to the Constitution. Let's see. Mark Trusso says, have you ever watched any of the World War III prophecies by the holy monk, the Elder Paisios, that are on YouTube? No, I have never heard of him. Well, now I've got one more thing to look up here. Elder Paisios, wow. I learn something new every day. I never heard of the Elder Paisios. Okay, Kathleen says, and 3 times 15 equals 45 for Trump and Cyrus. Well, that's a good point. I think you're onto something there. Wendy says, WFRN, please watch YouTube Frank26. He and his wife did a live video on Ala Moana Beach Park in Hawaii, where I am from. Okay, now I got something else to watch. Frank26 live video on Ala Moana. Ala Moana. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Seems pretty simple. When he says yesterday, so this is right up to date. Well, thanks for that. Bruce Deal says, I see many non-Catholics who... sorry, my chat took off here just a minute. Oh, dear. Wait a minute. Wow, went through a lot of chats. This is unbelievable. Okay, I see many non-Catholics who understand the times we are in, while a lot of Catholics do not see. I think it's because nothing is ever mentioned in most pulpits about these end times. I couldn't agree with you more, Bruce. When was the last time a priest talked about Daniel? I had a priest tell me once that Daniel is no longer relevant. He couldn't be more wrong. Jesus himself spoke about, when he was talking about the end times to his apostles, they asked him about the end times. And he said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Jesus did not bother to explain it because he referenced everyone to Daniel. Daniel, his prophecies become more important as the days go by, as each day goes by. And we're going to see that in the Middle East very shortly. A new era task says the UFOs increasing could be a sign of the end times, Nephilim, as in the days of Noah, unless they are military technology. Well, a lot of the UFOs are demonic. You have animal mutilations, you have UFOs, you have Bigfoot, all those things. Those are signs of the end. That's demonic manifestations. Crop circles, that's demonic. And they get their power to do that from human sacrifice, which is what goes on at Planned Parenthood. Unto the Revolution says, this seems most likely to me a new era. I agree. We're getting there to the new era. But we have to qualify to enter the new era. And we're having a sifting of the wheat right now. Wendy says, TAS, military technology, yes. Jacqueline says, they are going to try and use aliens to scare the people. Aldi says, William is like the grandpa I wish I had. All right, well, that's okay. M. Jody says, how will President Trump become a priest when he's married? Well, that's exactly why the Pope is going to allow married priests, in my opinion. You watch. He's going to allow married priests. And that's going to come back and bite him because... You watch. That's my prediction. My prediction is that the church is going to allow married priests. And won't they be surprised if Trump becomes a priest? That will really shake them up. When he says, Q says drones 6 feet wide can pick up a person. 6 feet wide can pick up a person? Could be. Kathleen says, the alien craft... quote, is made by people who are following the demons' instructions. The demons are very smart, and they teach people who follow them. They have been used in the different ages. Well, Mary prophesied that at La Salette. She prophesied about zombies. She prophesied about UFOs. She prophesied about alien abductions. Read the prophecies of La Salette. They're really amazing. Alti says, honestly, grateful he does this. Thanks, William. No problem. Jacqueline says, they are also as small as a fly. I've heard that too. Padre Pio says, to the revolution, I think it is military. We are 50 miles from a military base, and they were heading in that direction, Fort Ripley. Just never seen so many in formation. Really something to see. Alarming. It would be alarming. Bruce Steele says, I think many apparitions are discounted because they do not fit the church's modernist agenda. I couldn't agree with you more, Bruce, especially La Salette. Even at the time, Melanie Calvat was persecuted by the church, and she is a saint, was a saint. Bruce Steele says, okay, I read that. Kathleen says, PF was hungry, angry, or hangry when he slapped that woman's hand that wanted to talk to him about harvesting. Where is he going to get his next meal? Well, Kathleen, that's kind of gruesome talk here, but I'm glad most people don't know what you're talking about. M. White says, thanks, William. I meant, why are you doing a webcam on the issue of sexual abuse scandals by Benedict the 16th? Well, I just think it's important. I wanted to do it when he first came out with it, and for some reason or other, I never did. I didn't have this program at the time. I don't think I did. And I think Pope Benedict, I believe his life is coming to its conclusion, and I think that we are going to be shocked. It's going to be, well, I don't know how else I can put it. To the Revolution says, I can imagine it would be scary. I haven't seen the swarms or a tic-tac shaped UFO. I haven't either. Kathleen says, I saw a magazine with a 53 on the VW bug. I think that represents the rosary. Could be. Whenever I see 53 on the clock, I always think of the rosary, especially 153. And I see 153 quite a bit. Jacqueline says, Congress, Senate are stealing. Melinda Gates is spreading her wealth to fund abortion around the world. I know, and she's supposed to be a Catholic. A New Era TSS says, have you ever heard about the Trump prophecies from Mark Taylor? Yes, he's very positive, and I guess that's his main claim to fame. But he's very personable. I watch him every now and then. But like I say, I think he's too positive. It's not going to be quite as easy as he seems to think. Jacqueline says, we are living in debauchery. Yeah, well, of course, Jesus warned. He said it would be like this. He said it would be as in the days of Noah and as in the days of Lot. And both times he was talking about sexual perversion and degeneration. And that's exactly, Jesus was prophesying precisely the end times. Wendy says, the world got a brand new banking system called the quantum financial system that is unable to hack. It's connected with the satellites. In Hawaii, the bank tellers have learned of the new system. Haven't heard of that. M. Jody says, is it okay to convert the Vatican to the Vatican II church, or should I look for a traditional Catholic church? Well, you are certainly in a dilemma, M. Jody. If you want to convert and become a Catholic, I would try and find a traditional priest and have him give you instructions, because if you get instructions from a modernist priest, it's probably worse than not joining the church. Now, the following message is held for review. And I don't know why YouTube would block this, but let's see. Our church's calendar shows a snake coming out of Madonna's dress, and the child is sucking on an apple. She has a red drape, and I think she's the modern Eve, the scarlet beast, and the son, the Antichrist. Well, Wendy, I'd love to have you send me a picture of that. Isn't that strange? Do you suppose you could send me a picture of that? Find a calendar and just drop it in an envelope to me? I would appreciate that. I will definitely show that. That is very strange. Mark Trusso says, did you hear that the United Methodists will split in May between traditional and LGBTQRSTUV affirming congregations? Well, that's the wheat separated from the tares. Bruce Steele says, have you read Melanie's description of Our Lady at La Salette? Really beautiful. Yes, I've read the whole. It's interesting that she has a anvil on one side of her shoulder and what's on the other side? I forgot. Kathleen says, so I watched this priest talk about how they took out all the most important things out of the Bible. The 3 people who are not burned in the book of Daniel, and etc. Other things, so I read around. Yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Wendy says, I will mail the calendar. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. A rosary group of ladies thinks it's sacrilege from the New World Order. Well, yes, if you can send me the whole calendar, there's probably more in it than what you just described, Wendy. I would really be very happy to get that. Wendy says, oh yeah, Wendy said that. Okay, Kathleen says, because the priest said they're missing the stuff before and the stuff after, and what's the most relevant stuff, it was made so we wouldn't miss the important things in the Bible. I don't know what point he was trying to make there. And White says, William, do you think it's possible that your previous prediction that Obama would take over the U.S. in an executive presidency may still happen? No, I don't think so. As you know, I said at the time, in fact, before Obama was even elected, I said that he would be elected. And I said that the reason is because he is found in Bible prophecy. He is the leopard. He was the leopard in Daniel 7. There are 4 beasts that come up out of the sea in Daniel 7. A bear, a lion, a lioness, a leopard, and the 4th and final beast. And I identified all of them. And I said the 3rd, the leopard, was Barack Obama. He has 4 heads and 4 wings. That refers to the 44th president. He was given dominion. And what's the other thing now? Oh, he's a mixed race. That indicates that the leopard is both black and white. And there's something else. There's 4 different characteristics of the leopard. And Obama fit all of them. The false prophets will try to tell you that Germany is the leopard, and that's nonsense. Obama and the country fulfill, both the king and the kingdom fulfill that prophecy. But he's come and gone. So, and the first 2 beasts have all come and gone also. All the first 3 beasts have come and gone. And what does that mean? That means that we're waiting for the 4th and final beast, which is the Antichrist. He's next. So, your question is, I don't think, and I'm not sure that if I ever said that. What I did say was that Obama would provoke Putin into World War III, which was in Daniel 11, and I think we successfully maneuvered past that expression with the election of Donald Trump, but we're not out of the woods because we have not had the war in Daniel 8 between the ram and the goat. Let's see, Padre Pio says, we also have seen in the daytime large silver UFOs in the sky hovering. And then when we see them, they take off really fast. Silver, large, hovering like nothing we have seen before in the last 2 years. That's probably demonic. They have a lot of power in these end times. Read Mary's prophecies at La Salette. Very interesting. Kathleen says there's absolutely no such thing as an alien. That is a trick. They are fallen angels. I agree 100%. Aldi says, yeah, remember, aliens can take any form. Lucifer can turn into anything from what I'm aware. Yes, he parades as an angel of light. He's trying to make UFOs, they're trying to make it seem as if there's life on other planets. That is to degrade the idea that God created humanity. Let's see, Jacqueline says, Wendy, wow. Alti says, angels. Padre Pio says, I'm not saying the UFOs are aliens, but strange objects we have never seen before. Could be. My chat took off. Sorry, people. I'm trying to get back where I was. Oh, could be the government doing these too. Secret space program. Well, I agree. They're not all demonic. To the Revolution says, I read an article where the author speculated the really fast tic-tac UFO, like the Nimitz encounter, were military aircraft. I doubt this, probably demons. Bruce Steele says, is the Book of Truth false? It speaks about Christ's reign in the New Jerusalem. Well, what I have read in the Book of Truth, I could not find anything in it that's false. I don't guarantee that Maria Divine Mercy had conversations with Jesus and Mary, because I have no way to verify that one way or another. But I have not, well, I shouldn't say that. I do disagree with one thing that she wrote. She said that the two witnesses, Enoch and Elijah, symbolize Judaism and Christianity. And I disagree with that. I think that they represent real individuals, real people. And that's what Mary says at La Salette also. So I don't agree with everything in the Book of Truth. M. Jody says, thank you, William. I heard some things in the RCIA class I have been attending that I know is not what the church taught. I am thankful for your videos here. It really is a blessing. Well, thank you, M. Jody. Patricia Iron says, Wendy, I have that calendar and did not notice that. Really? Oh, and I'm going to get 100 calendars. I can tell that. I have not seen that calendar. I'll have to look at my calendars because I usually pick up 3 or 4 of them. Maybe I've got the calendar already. Let's see. Wendy just... YouTube blocked your next comment, Wendy, and I better not read it. I'll read some of your next comment, Wendy, but I'm not going to print it. You guys are going to be blown away when Mr. Tapley shows the calendar. It also has the Blessed Mother with a slight mustache and a thick neck and an Adam's apple. No kidding. It sounds demonic. I can't read the rest of that, Wendy, because YouTube will censor it right out of my speech. They've done that before. The New Era Task says, oh, wait a minute. Patricia said, oh, wait a minute. What's going on here? Oh, here it is. It would be great if the music industry would change for the better and finally have good material. My thinking is, if these industries get cleaned up, then the younger generation could have good examples and not be so influenced in such evil ways. Well, that's certainly... We used to get good movies out of Hollywood. When I was a kid, my father would take us to movies. There was no question that it was... John Wayne was always an inspiring person as far as being patriotic. When he says, Patricia, what color? And does it say vocation? Let's see. Patricia Iron says, red calendar. And yes, it says vocations. I got my magnifying glass out and cannot discern if that is a cord with a tassel coming out from her clothes, or a snake. Or is it supposed to look like a snake? Well, you've certainly got my curiosity piqued here, so I want to take a look at it. Wendy says that's a tassel. That is England's buildings. I've danced hula in England. Look, the snake has a chain connected to the crescent to the brick. Well, people, there's no sense teasing us about this image. You've got to send it to me so I can... Is it on? I wonder if it's online somewhere. Mark Crusoe says, how soon will the 3 days of darkness, as predicted by St. Padre Pio, occur? The 3 days of darkness, don't worry about that. That comes at the very, very end. We have a lot to go through before the 3 days of darkness. Wendy says, the color has brown light lines. Looks like the snake's skin color. Patricia, do you see the apple? Kathleen says, B.O. is the head goat that does so much damage so fast that he seems to fly. All the Smithsonian Institute, he seems to be over the sun. That was on a podium. He was floating in a chair in the picture. Well, that you're talking about that official portrait. I did a video on that, and that portrait, official portrait, is an attempt to show Barack Obama as the God Pan. Altic says, from my understanding, we need the scapular and the blessed candle for 3 days of darkness. Could you tell me more, William? Well, yes. You need the scapular and the blessed. You need a scapular and a rosary right now. And you do need a blessed candle for the 3 days of darkness, because it has to be made out of 50%, at least 50% beeswax. Kathleen says, I think B.O. It's also the fake Messiah called You're talking about the Maya. What's his name? The Mahdi? The Muyaddin? The Mahdi, I think you're talking about. Yeah, the Mahdi. M. White says, William, the prophecies of Dmitry Duduman detail how Russia, Venezuela, and other countries bring down the U.S. using nuclear weapons on numerous cities. Have you heard of them? Sorry to scare people. That's all right. We're supposed to scare people if they should be prepared, if that's what it takes. If you don't want to be scared, don't read the book of Revelation. But I have watched Dmitry Duduman on here on YouTube, and I recommend that everybody type in Dmitry Duduman and watch his prophecies. Patricia Arndt says, yes, I see the baby Jesus eating the apple. Well, this sounds like a very interesting calendar, so I sure hope you ladies, Wendy, I hope to see that in the mail, because as you say, I am definitely going to show that to everybody. And maybe if you could find a source on the internet, then I could discover it. Look up the company that printed the calendar, and you might have a source that I could look at now. Well, people, it's been an hour and a half, and I don't mind discussing like this because it was a very interesting discussion from everybody, and I'll be back Monday. No class tomorrow. I will be back tomorrow morning after Mass at 10 a.m. for the live stream rosary on our World Family Rosary Network, and then I will resume this series on Pope Benedict's encyclical about the sexual revolution and how it affected the Catholic Church. Okay, so I think... Okay, very good. Well, everybody, thanks for watching, and let me get this back where I should be. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all bright and early tomorrow morning. And until then, God bless all of you, and may all of you have a very blessed evening. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,